Hello and welcome to Indus News Live from Islamabad. I am Hira Mustafa and these are the headlines. Pakistan's ruling party PTI has won the Azad Jammu and Kashmir's parliamentary elections. At a press conference, Chief Election Commissioner Abdul Rashid Salaria said the Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf has won 25 out of 45 seats. He said Pakistan People's Party has grabbed 11 seats, followed by the Pakistan Muslim League Nawaz 6. "46 Afghan soldiers, including 5 officers, have fled into Pakistan after losing their military post across the border. Pakistan military's media wing says Afghan soldiers have been given refuge, food and necessary medical care. Earlier on 1st of July, 35 Afghan soldiers were also given a safe passage into Pakistan on their request. In Tunisia, clashes and counter-protests have erupted after President Kais Saied sacked the Prime Minister and suspended Parliament. Several people have injured after the protesters hurled stones on each other outside the Parliament. Meanwhile, international community, including the EU, has urged all political actors in Tunisia to avoid violence. Lebanese lawmakers have picked billionaire businessman Najib Mikati as new prime minister. After winning a majority of votes in parliament, Mikati said he will implement a French plan to save the country from its financial crisis. His designation as premier came after veteran politician Saad al-Hariri abandoned attempts at forming a cabinet earlier this month. The bodies of Pakistani mountaineer Ali Satpara, Iceland's John Snorri, and Chile's Juan Pablo Mojar have been found on the world's second highest mountain, K2. Gilgit-Baltistan's information minister Fatehullah Khan confirmed this to the local media. The three had gone missing in February and were declared dead few days later after their bodies were not found. Pakistan has received a second consignment of 3 million doses of the Moderna vaccine through the COVAX facility. The country has reported over 3,700 cases during the last 24 hours, taking the positivity rate to more than 7.5%. Meanwhile, Russia has registered 727 deaths in a day as the country witnesses a surge in cases blamed on the Delta variant. Globally, there are more than 4 million deaths and over 194 million infections. And in the Tokyo Olympics, Japan has topped the medal standings, followed by the US 7 golds and China 6 on day 3 of the Games. The Team Japan bagged golds at the table tennis mixed doubles event and in the 73-kilogram category of judo. Earlier in the day, the United Kingdom, Norway and the Philippines also earned their first gold medals of the Olympics. Well, those were the headlines. News in detail coming after the short break. Stay with us. Welcome back. Now the news in detail. Pakistan's ruling party PTI has won the Azad Jammu and Kashmir's parliamentary elections. More on this report. At a press conference, Chief Election Commissioner Abdul Rashid Salaria said the Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf has won 25 out of 45 seats. He said Pakistan's People's Party has grabbed 11 seats, followed by the Pakistan Muslim League Nawaz 6. Salaria added that all Jammu and Kashmir Muslim Conference and Jammu Kashmir People's Party have taken 1 seat each. The AJK Chief Election Commissioner said Voter turnout remained 62%. Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan thanked people of Kashmir over victory of his party. He said being an ambassador of Kashmir, he will continue to raise his voice on all international forums. Khan said he will ensure that the international community must fulfill its commitment of self-determination to the people of occupied Kashmir. Over 700 candidates contested for 33 seats in AJK's Legislative Assembly and 12 reserve seats for Kashmiri refugees settled in Pakistan. For more on this, we have with us Azad Jammu, Minister of State for Climate Change from Islamabad. Ma'am, thank you for joining us. Ma'am, these elections were the continuation of the robust democratic rule that the state of Azad Jammu and Kashmir has enjoyed for decades now. How do the people of AJK compare their lives with that of their brethren in the Indian Occupied Kashmir?
You know that Pakistan itself offered to the international community, to the international observer, and to all of the human rights commission in the world to come and visit Pakistan through media. But on the other side of the Indian Occupied Kashmir, there's a blackout, there's no access to the basic human rights, there's no access to the basic human freedom, there's a blackout. So there will be always a comparison, and the international community now acknowledges and they keep an eye on this total region that yes, Kashmiri in Pakistan are far much better living in Pakistan rather than into the comparison of the Indian Occupied Kashmir. Yes, yes.
Right. Ma'am, the world has witnessed a marked difference between the two sides of Kashmir, and yet they appear passive in their approach. Why do you think the international community and global forums fail to take actionable steps to end the misery and oppression by the Indian occupying forces?
There are so many atrocities. There are so many mirrors. There is a basic human violation in the occupied Indian Jammu Kashmir. Then why wouldn't the international community wake up and take notice and solve this the resolution or the plebiscite under the United Nations, which United Nations promised itself to the Kashmiri people? The first thing I would say is that unfortunately there is a bias towards all of the Muslim occupied areas. Either it's the Palestine, either it is Rohingya Muslims or the Kashmiri people. There is a huge bias towards thing, and maybe it's because there are political settlements between the country. They support each other. There are blocks they support each other, and I think the basic violation that they just get away with that, like the RSS, the dark face of the Indian government, of the Woody government. It's maybe not maybe, but for sure it's because it's a huge economy key, and they don't want to interrupt their relationship due to the Kashmiri people.
Azad Jammu, Minister of State for Climate Change, thank you for speaking to Indus News. And now we're moving on. Indian troops have martyred another civilian in occupied Jammu and Kashmir's Kulgam district. The youth was targeted during a military crackdown in Abharal area of the district. Earlier, occupying forces martyred a youth in Yaripura area of the same district. The Indian forces have now killed 7 Kashmiris in Kulgam, Bandipora and Baramulla districts over the past 72 hours. Rights group says the occupying troops have martyred at least 400 Kashmiris since August 2019. "46 Afghan soldiers, including 5 officers, have fled into Pakistan after losing their military posts across the border. Pakistan military's media wing says the soldiers have been given refuge on the request of the Afghan military. The Inter-Services Public Relations Department of the Army said the soldiers will be returned to Kabul after due process. The ISPR said the Afghan personnel arrived at Arundu sector of Chitral last night. They said the Afghan soldiers have been provided food, shelter and necessary medical care. Earlier, on 1st of July, 35 Afghan soldiers were also given a safe passage into Pakistan on their request. For more on this, we are joined by Lieutenant General retired General Lodi, a defense analyst from Islamabad. Sir, thank you for joining us. Mr. Lodi, the US and Afghan forces have stepped up airstrikes against the Taliban. What impact would it have on the rapid gains being made by the Taliban in the ongoing conflict?
Thank you very much. I think we should also consider that whether it is a violation of any agreement between the Taliban and the US forces, because as far as I understand, Afghan Taliban did not attack any American individual while they were withdrawing, and now that they have totally withdrawn, probably it seems that they have gone back on that agreement. Anyway, what is likely to happen is that with this inaction, excuse me, of the US, the environment is going to further vitiate, and any prospects of talks between Afghan government and Afghan Taliban will further diminish. And that is exactly, in my opinion, what the US wants. They actually do not want that there should be a peace in Afghanistan. They never wanted that in the last 20 years. They just wanted to keep this area in turmoil so that Chinese influence can be stopped. Russia and Central Asian countries cannot use this route to the warm waters. The CPEC gets stalled. So all these things are very well known to us. So I think they are just pursuing their policy. One, that they have not honored the agreement. They are breaking that, because once we say that we have no favorites and it should be Afghan-led, Afghan-owned solution, which means that we must leave the Afghans at their own, machinations. So they are not doing that. So I think it is going to further bring bitterness in the overall situation.
Right. Mr. Lodi, the Taliban have warned Washington of consequences for stepping into the fight again. Do we see a delay in the withdrawal of foreign forces if the Taliban retaliate by attacking US assets in Afghanistan?
In my assessment, they have already left. There is no soldiers, US soldiers left in the area. Maybe only few of them may be there. So there's no question of any delay or no delay. The only thing is that the Turkish soldiers who are there to, look after the Kabul airport, to defend the Kabul airport, maybe their withdrawal is delayed a bit. Otherwise, I think all NATO forces, all US forces, they have left. But one thing, as far as the military assessment is concerned, if such a large force, when it was here, they could not subdue Taliban, definitely these over-the-horizon operations will not be able to harm them much. So Taliban are likely to continue their gains. And of course, there can be a little slowdown. They may change their tactics, all those things. And also, I think it also bodes bad as far as the Afghan government is concerned, because now Taliban will not be in any mood to forgive anyone in the Afghan government.
Mr. Lodi, the international community has been warning of a possible civil war in Afghanistan, but with widespread fighting across the country, isn't it already a civil war?
It is a civil war. There's no doubt about it. But, international community also think at times, not very correctly, that maybe Afghan Taliban they have no support in the Afghan civil society. All of us who know about the insurrection movements and such operations, we all know that such a long struggle is not possible without the support of the local population. So in my assessment, and I do not insist on that, Afghan Taliban, they enjoy a lot of support as far as Afghan society is concerned, and this civil war will only last as long as American Air Force keeps supporting the Afghan army. The moment that support diminishes or reduces, Afghan Taliban are likely to take over everything.
Right. Mr. Lodi, Pakistan and the Afghan government have shared a rather bittersweet relation lately because of the Kabul administration constantly blaming Pakistan for its failures in Afghanistan. With the Ashraf Ghani's government now requesting refuge for its troops that fled for their lives into Pakistan, how do you see this relationship between the two countries moving forward?
We must try to differentiate between the present Afghan government which has a very limited, say as far as the Afghanistan is concerned, and the Afghan people and Afghan society at large. They are our brothers. Anyone who wants any refuge which we can afford to give, we should do that, irrespective of what Afghan government, the present government says, which I do not think that they have already lost their legitimacy because of two things. One, that Americans, while going, did not take them into confidence and talk to Afghan Taliban separately. And secondly, the way this government was installed, we know it very well. Just with 5% votes, for 6 months the results were not announced. And when the results were announced, two people said that they are the president, so we know all that. So I think irrespective of what Ghani and Amrullah Saleh and Mohib, they keep saying, we can boycott them, but not the Afghan army and not the Afghan people. They are our brothers. We must strive to have good relations with Afghanistan society, Afghan army, and Afghan people as a whole.
Lieutenant General retired named Khalid Lodi, thank you for speaking to Indus News. And now we are moving on. The United Nations says civilian casualties in Afghanistan have risen by 47% in the first half of 2021. In a report, UNAMA said more than 5,100 civilians have died as fighting rages between the Taliban and Afghan forces. It said nearly 2,400 Afghan civilians were killed or injured in May and June, the highest two-month figure since 2009. Following the report, UN envoy Deborah Lyons urged the warring parties to step up efforts for a peace settlement. Meanwhile, the Taliban have termed the report as biased and false, saying that it almost excuses the US and the Afghan government. In a statement, spokesperson Zabihullah Mujahid called on UNAMA to make effort to investigate the incidents closely. More news stories coming up after the short break. Stay with us. Welcome back. Tunisia's president has sacked the prime minister and suspended parliament after violent protests broke out over government's mishandling of COVID-19. Kais Saied has also assumed executive authority with the assistance of a new prime minister. Saied has assigned a close ally to supervise the interior ministry. More in this report.
Tunisian President Kais Saied joined crowds in the streets in central Tunis to celebrate his decision to oust the government. Parliament Speaker Rachid Ghannouchi arrived at the parliament to call a session in defiance of Said's move. However, army stationed outside the building stopped the 80-year-old former political exile from entering the building. Ghannouchi branded Said's move as a coup.
Today we were surprised by supreme decisions that not only surprised Ennahda but also surprised the Tunisian people and the world in a country that is proud of being the first Arab democracy and having the latest constitution announcing decisions that are essentially a coup, and it is called nothing but a coup.
The opposition parties, particularly the ruling Ennahda party, also called their own supporters to come onto the streets in protest. Dozens of Ennahda supporters faced off against Said supporters and threw stones at each other near the parliament building.
The decisions by President Kais Saied are not correct, against the constitution and the reality. They bring us back again to 1954. The scene of the parliament closed by tanks is very disgraceful.
Critics fear that President's move is part of a shift away from democracy and a return to the autocratic rule of the past in the country. This is the biggest challenge yet to the democratic system Tunisia introduced in 2011 after massive protests that triggered the Arab Spring.
For more on this, we are joined by Matt Gardiner, a political analyst from Tunisia's capital, Tunis. Matt Gardiner, thank you for speaking to Indus News. Mr. Matt, President Kais Saied has sacked the Prime Minister and suspended Parliament after protests broke out over government's mishandling of COVID-19. Were the protests too violent to sack an elected government, and whether these protests were planted to oust the Prime Minister?
Well, I think we have to look at more of a long-standing approach. I mean, it's not only COVID-19 that has brought Tunisia to this situation. In fact, the economic crisis has been looming large for quite some time now. The Prime Minister himself was in talks to renegotiate yet another IMF loan, which many Tunisians, especially those who were part of the revolution, those who consider themselves revolutionary, to be inimical to the interests of Tunisia and to the direction Tunisia should take. And so, yeah, on a more immediate sense, one could see it that way, but I think a longer temporal horizon would be a good idea.
Right. Mr. Matt, critics have called the President Kais Saied's move a coup. What is your take on this?
I'm going to leave that question up to constitutional scholars, but there are some indications in support of that statement. For one, the president refused to swear in 11 new ministers since the wintertime. In recent meetings, he's been tipping his hand to the fact that he would like the people to decide on a number of very prominent decisions, chief among them perhaps the Constitutional Court. That process has been frozen for some time due to political infighting and the allocation of positions that could be elected. And unfortunately, that is the one body that could see a resolution to this current predicament. And so I think that for those who are calling it a coup, one could see it that way. Then again, it could be well within his purview as a constitutional lawyer to argue against that and to say that he is working within the confines of the Constitution.
Mr. Matt, clashes and counter-protests have been witnessed in the capital. Do you see further escalation in the unrest in coming days?
I certainly hope not. I don't think that it is within Ennahda's best interest to call people out to violently protest. Typically, Ennahda has been very concerned for its own existential security, meaning that it can remain a player in politics. And it's the major bloc that's coming out against Kais Saied right now. In addition, the military is revered by the people here, very much so, less so the police and the Ministry of Interior. And so I don't think we're going to see extremely violent clashes and certainly not anything like a civil war, as some have suggested.
Matt Gardner, thank you for speaking to Indus News. And now we're moving on. Lebanese lawmakers have picked billionaire businessman Najib Mikati as a new prime minister. After winning a majority of votes in the parliament, Mikati said he will implement a French plan to save the country from its financial crisis. His designation as premier came after veteran politician Saad al-Hariri abandoned attempts at forming a cabinet earlier this month. Lebanon has been facing a worsening economic crisis since the Beirut port blast last year that killed some 200 people. The country has since been run by a caretaker administration and has witnessed its currency collapsing and unemployment soaring. But Hariri says Mikati will succeed in forming a cabinet. Israeli fighter jets have launched air raids on the Gaza Strip, violating the May ceasefire with Hamas yet again. In a tweet, the Israeli military said it struck a weapons manufacturing site that allegedly belongs to the group. It claimed the attack was in response to incendiary balloons launched from the Strip. The Israeli army said the site was near civilian sites in Gaza, including a school. But Palestinian media says Israeli warplanes struck agricultural land and 2 other areas in the southern Khan Yunis city. Meanwhile, a Palestinian youth has come to his injuries sustained from Israeli army gunfire in the occupied West Bank 2 months ago. China's Vice Foreign Minister Xi Fang says the U.S. is responsible for the stalemate in bilateral ties. He made the remarks during a meeting with U.S. Deputy Secretary of State Wendy Sherman in Tianjin. Xi said Washington portrays Beijing as an imaginary enemy to reignite a national sense of purpose. He said the U.S. aims to divert their attention from its domestic public discontent by demonizing China. The Vice Foreign Minister accused the U.S. of launching a campaign aimed at containing China. He urged Washington to change its highly misguided mindset and dangerous policy. The U.S. Deputy State Secretary is also expected to meet the Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi today. U.S. President Joe Biden will meet Iraqi Prime Minister Mustafa al-Khatami in Washington, D.C. These are their first face-to-face talks as part of a strategic dialogue between Washington and Baghdad. U.S. officials say the two sides will seal a deal formally ending the U.S. combat mission in Iraq by the end of 2021. They say the goal of the enduring defeat of ISIS still remains, so the mission has not been accomplished. There are currently 2,500 U.S. troops in Iraq focusing on countering the remnants of ISIS. The shift is not expected to have a major impact since Washington has already moved towards focusing on training Iraqi forces. Russia has blocked 49 websites linked to jailed Kremlin critic Alexei Navalny. This comes as pressure mounts on the movement of the opposition leader ahead of parliamentary elections in the autumn. Navalny's aide, Leonid Volkov, said the decision was made by the Prosecutor General's office. The blocked websites include his main websites of Anti-Corruption Foundation and those of his key allies. The Kremlin critic was arrested in January after he returned to Russia following months of treatment in Germany for a nerve agent poisoning. He was subsequently jailed for 2.5 years on old fraud charges, and his organizations were banned. The move has barred his allies and sponsors from running in parliamentary elections in September. Russia says it plans to set up a special economic zone with no customs and a reduced set of taxes on a disputed chain of islands near Japan. Visiting the islands, Prime Minister Mikhail Mishustin said he would discuss an unprecedented set of economic measures with President Putin. Responding, a Japanese government spokesperson said Tokyo would protest to Russia over the visit. The Soviet Union has seized the islands at the end of World War II. The territorial row has prevented the two countries from signing a formal peace treaty. Japan describes the islands the Northern Territories and Russia calls them the Kurils. Azerbaijan says Armenian forces targeted its positions along the border. In a statement, Defense Ministry said the Armenian forces used firearms and grenade launchers to attack in the Kalbahar district. The statement said the attack was launched from various positions in the Basar-Kechar district. Baku said its armed forces are taking appropriate retaliatory measures. Both parties continue to report border incidents since the end of military action in the Nagorno-Karabakh last year. In Nigeria, armed bandits have abducted a negotiator sent to pay ransom money to secure the release of 136 students kidnapped 2 months ago. School authorities in Niger State says kidnappers demanded nearly $73,000 to release the students. The government has said it would not pay any ransom. The school contributed to ransom and some parents also sold property to raise cash. But they said the kidnappers arrested the negotiator, calling that the ransom money was short. Earlier, kidnappers released 28 students seized from another school but kept hold of 81 others. And now it's time to take a short break. Stay with us. Welcome back. Brazil has registered 476 new coronavirus deaths and over 18,000 cases overnight. Globally, there are 4.1 million fatalities and more than 194 million cases so far. More in this report.
Even the most successful vaccination drives are turning out to be futile due to a surge in coronavirus cases driven by the Delta variant. China, where the virus originated, reported its highest new daily cases since the end of January. In the United States, top infectious disease expert Dr. Anthony Fauci says the country is in an unnecessary predicament of soaring cases. He said the fresh surge is fueled by unvaccinated Americans and the Delta strain. While in Australia, New South Wales has logged its second highest daily surge of the year.
Some settings might change. We might need to go harder in some areas and release some settings in others. So please know that our government is always looking at the best options we have available. And the options are, as I say, our mission is to allow our citizens to live as safely and as freely as possible. And that's always been our position during the pandemic.
In Europe, political scandals over government handling of the pandemic continue to unfold. UK Health Secretary Sajid Javid has apologized after suggesting people shouldn't cower from COVID-19. UK authorities have warned that young people are getting seriously ill from the virus in the latest wave. Amid violent protests and political tensions in France, the Parliament has approved another law requiring vaccination passes for domestic travel. President Emmanuel Macron urged people to get vaccinated and shunned the notion that new rules are an attack on personal freedoms.
What is your freedom worth if you say to me, I don't want to be vaccinated, but if tomorrow you infect your father, your mother, or myself? I am a victim of your freedom when you had the possibility to have something to protect yourself and me.
In Iran, even with a stringent lockdown, the latest wave driven by the Delta variant is peaking. Meanwhile, Indonesia's government has eased restrictions despite warnings that are loosening the curbs, which could spark another wave.
Pakistan has received a second consignment of 3 million doses of the Moderna vaccine through the COVAX facility. The country has reported over 3,700 cases during the last 24 hours, taking the positivity rate to more than 7.5%. Pakistan has recorded 32 deaths overnight, pushing the toll to over 23,000. The country has logged more than 1 million cases since the pandemic began. Saudi Arabia's Foreign Minister, Prince Faisal bin Farhan Al Saud, will arrive in Islamabad on an official visit on the 27th of July. It will be Prince Faisal's second state visit to Pakistan within a year. A Pakistani government spokesperson said bilateral relations and cooperation in various fields will be reviewed in the meeting. The Saudi Arabian embassy said the visit is a continuation of high-level engagements between the two countries. Earlier, Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman visited Islamabad in February 2019. The two sides had signed investment deals worth $20 billion during his visit. Prime Minister Imran Khan also visited Riyadh in May and signed several agreements on economic, trade and defense cooperation. Bodies of Pakistani mountaineer Ali Satbara, Iceland's John Snorri, and Chile's Juan Pablo Mohr have been found on the world's second highest mountain, K2. Gilgit-Baltistan's Information Minister Fatehullah Khan has confirmed this to local media. According to a local tourism company, the bodies were discovered 300 meters below Bottleneck. Earlier, Sadhu Satbara, along with Canadian filmmaker Alia Saikali and Pasang Kaji Sherpa, were on a trek to find the bodies of his father and two other mountaineers. The mountaineers had gone missing on February 5th and were declared dead few days later after their bodies were not found. They were trying to climb the 8,611 meters K2 peak without oxygen in winter. Meanwhile, a Scottish climber, Rick Allen, is feared dead in an avalanche on K2 after he attempted a new route to the summit. In India, the death toll from floods and landslides triggered by the heavy rains has risen to 183. Maharashtra officials say 164 people have died of different rain-related incidents across the state. The search for 31 people missing in a landslide at Talia village has been ended. Authorities said they have evacuated about 230,000 people from the flood-hit areas. In Karnataka, authorities said over 46,000 people have been safely evacuated, while 9 others died in a landslide in Himachal Pradesh on Sunday. In China, Typhoon Infa has made its second landfall in the Pinghu coastal area of the country's eastern Zhejiang province. According to the National Meteorological Center, a number of villages in the province were flooded. More than 12,000 evacuation sites have been set up across the province, with around 1.5 million people transferred to shelters. The typhoon has also impacted the China's coastal areas of Shanghai and Jiangsu province with heavy rainstorms and floods. It has also disrupted China's transportation system, causing cancellation of the most high-speed trains in Shanghai, Zhejiang and Jiangsu. The Chinese aviation authorities say the typhoon has also led to the closure of 18 airports in the eastern part of the country. Heavy downpours and thunderstorms have caused severe flash floods across London. Hospitals have asked patients to stay away after emergency departments were hit, causing operational issues. Torrential rain has caused severe flooding in homes, roads and stations. Vehicles were stranded and officials warned people not to travel in hazardous conditions. In a tweet, the London Fire Brigade said that it has received more than 600 calls reporting flooding. The Environment Agency issued 2 flood warnings and a further 19 less severe flood alerts in the city. Wildfires are raging on the Italian island of Sardinia, forcing hundreds of people to evacuate overnight. Local media says nearly 1,500 people were evacuated across Sardinia. More in this report.
The European Union is sending 4 forest firefighting planes to Sardinia in response to a request from Italy. 2 of the Canadair planes are provided by France from the European Civil Protection Pool. Greece is contributing the other 2 from the resources of the rescue program. The island's governor says around 50,000 acres of vegetation have gone up in flames. Meanwhile, in Spain, a wildfire that started in Santa Coloma de Queralt in Catalonia has scorched more than 3,000 acres of woodland. A large fire broke out in southern France that has burned an area of around 2,100 acres. It has affected more than 100,000 households.
In the U.S. state of California, authorities are bracing for more blazes as smoke columns from raging wildfires could spawn lightning storms. The swarming Dixie Fire has already incinerated more than 190,000 acres in northern California. Officials say the state's largest fire in Butte County is only 21% contained so far. The firefighters struggled to contain the blaze as it gained ground by joining with another fire nearby. Authorities have issued mandatory evacuation orders for the eastern shore of Lake Almanac. Meanwhile, in Oregon, the bootleg fire razed over 408,000 acres and is 46% contained. More than 80 large active wildfires in 13 U.S. states have so far charred about 1.4 million acres. German Chancellor Angela Merkel has attended the annual Opera Bayreuth Festival in the southern country.
Angela Merkel was accompanied by her husband, Joachim Saar, on the red carpet for the event. The Bayreuth Festival, conceived by Richard Wagner, dates back to 1876 and stages his operas. Although Wagner died half a century before Adolf Hitler came to power, the Nazi dictator was his avid admirer. Wagner's work fascinates eager opera enthusiasts who often wait as long as 10 years for tickets to the opera festival. The annual opera frenzy is a highlight of the German cultural life.
In the United States, the 38th annual New Jersey Lottery Festival of Ballooning has returned after a 1-year hiatus due to the pandemic. More in this report.
The crowd in Redington Township watched as over 100 colorful hot air balloons filled the sky on a clear, sunny day. Redington's calm winds were ideal for the flight as families enjoyed the festival.
I've lived here for 13 years in Hunterdon County in Flemington, New Jersey, and I've never had a balloon land in my backyard ever, and I'm so excited because we were watching them from our porch this morning, and then all of a sudden there was a balloon that was right over our house, and I was like, land! And they finally landed, and I couldn't be happier.
Nearly 100 different hot air balloons participated in the festival. The New Jersey Division of Travel and Tourism claims it is the largest summertime hot air balloon and music festival in North America.
And now it's time to take a short break. Stay with us. Welcome back. European stocks have pulled back, tracking lackluster global sentiment. Investors are monitoring corporate earnings and look ahead to a key meeting of the U.S. Federal Reserve. Frankfurt stocks and the CAC 40 in Paris have slid over 0.5%. The pan-European stock 600 has also slipped nearly 0.5%. London FTSE and Italy's FTSE MIB have edged lower as well. For the weather updates, we have Nala Shuja with us.
Thank you. We're going to start off with Abu Dhabi, where the weather is expected to be hot with temperatures rising to 44 degrees Celsius. While in Amsterdam, there will be rain with temperatures at 21 degrees Celsius. If we head to Ankara, the weather is pleasantly sunny with temperatures at 30 degrees Celsius. Moving down under to Auckland, the temperature is chilly at 19 degrees Celsius with expected rain. Now, if you are traveling to Bangkok, there will be a thunderstorm with temperatures around 31 degrees Celsius. While in Beijing, there is sunny weather in the forecast with temperatures at 33 degrees Celsius. While Beirut will also be experiencing some sunny weather with temperatures at 32 degrees Celsius. Berliners will experience a thunderstorm with temperatures at 27 degrees Celsius. Heading to Cairo, the sun will be out at 36 degrees Celsius. Down under in Canberra, the temperatures are at 11 degrees Celsius with clouds swirling overhead, veiling the sun. In Islamabad, the weather is also cloudy, keeping temperatures at 35 degrees Celsius. While in Jakarta, the temperatures are steady at 32 degrees Celsius with partially sun in the forecast. That's all we have for now. Back to you.
Thank you, Nala. That's all for now. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at indus.news.